Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. When companies advertise their gaming monitors, mice or any other product specifically made for gaming, then the message always includes the superior precision and responsiveness provided by these gaming devices. So today we have gaming mice with a polling rate of 1000 Hz, monitors with display refresh rates of 240 Hz, as well as very powerful graphic cards capable of producing those high frame rates that are required for games to feel responsive and smooth. So when a well-known company puts the gaming sticker on one of their products, then this raises the expectations of the consumer, since that term is associated with great performance and higher value. But when it comes to gaming laptops, then I feel that many of them should not be called gaming laptops. I say that because while many of them do come with a very powerful CPU and maybe even a GTX 1080 capable of running very demanding games at 160 frames per second, the gameplay experience is neither smooth nor responsive on many of those gaming laptops, as they are held back by a 60 Hz display. So while gaming monitors have moved far away from 60 Hz in the last few years, you can still find gaming laptops that come with such low refresh rate panels. But what difference does a 120 Hz panel make on a laptop? And if you have to decide between a 4K 60 Hz display model and a 1080p 120 Hz model, then which one should you choose for gaming? So to find out if 120 Hz actually make a difference, ASUS kindly provided me with a review sample of the G701 VIK to run my tests on. The version I got here is the BA049T, which has a 17.3-inch 1080p IPS panel display. It supports a maximum refresh rate of 120 Hz as well as G-Sync. The CPU is an Intel Core i7-7700HQ, and in combination with its GTX 1080, this laptop provides more than enough performance to run even demanding games at high frame rates. If you plan to buy a laptop, then don't just look for the model but also the versions, because for every laptop there are multiple versions where sometimes these even come with different displays. So when you are hunting for the lowest price, then make sure that you order the correct version of the laptop. When you are not careful, then there is a risk that you end up getting the 4K 60 Hz version instead of the 1080p 120 Hz version, and that could be a quite expensive oversight. Now let's have a look at what kind of impact a refresh rate of 120 Hz has on the button to pixel delay or the responsiveness of a game. So to measure that, I use a high-speed camera, a gaming monitor, or in this case the gaming laptop, and a mouse which has a LED connected directly to its left mouse button, which will light up when I press it. Inside of Overwatch I mapped the move left action to the left mouse button so that my character will move to the left when I press it. So for every test case I repeated this test 20 times, and to get the delay results I had to review the recorded high-speed footage where I looked for the frame where the LED lights up. And then I counted the frames until the monitor showed me the action triggered by that input. This then allowed me to calculate the delay between the button and the pixel. Now we want to know what kind of delay decrease we get from a 120 Hz display compared to 60 Hz. So in the first test I set the display refresh rate on the laptop to 60 Hz and limited the frame rate to 60 inside of Overwatch. Under these conditions I then measured an average button to pixel delay of 34.17 milliseconds. When I then set the display's refresh rate to 120 Hz and limited the frame rate to 120 inside of Overwatch, then this lowered the button to pixel delay by about 12 milliseconds on average. You can also further decrease the delay by running games at frame rates much higher than the display's refresh rate. So when Overwatch runs at 300 FPS at 60 Hz, then the button to pixel delay is nearly as low as what I measured with 300 FPS at 120 Hz. So when we just look at the delay between the press of a button and the display showing us the result of that input, then with brute force or an extremely high frame rate, we can get similar results at 60 Hz and 120 Hz. However, what we must not forget is that the more frames get displayed per second, the smoother the game feels and aiming becomes more precise. This gameplay experience can hardly be quantified in milliseconds. Everyone who ever played on a display with 120 Hz or more knows how much smoother the game feels on such high refresh rate displays. Another factor that has a quite big impact on your experience is tearing. That's when your display shows you parts of two different images, which happens when the graphics card finished rendering a new image while the old one was currently sent to the display. This can be fixed by turning on FreeSync. However, that leads to a massive delay increase at 60 Hz as well as a noticeable increase at 120 Hz. So this shows that if you have to use FreeSync to get rid of tearing, then you benefit from 120 Hz as that has 50 milliseconds less delay on this laptop. If your gaming laptop or monitor supports NVIDIA's G-Sync or AMD's FreeSync, then you can get rid of tearing without the massive delay increase that is caused by FreeSync. The only thing that you need to take care of is to ensure that your frame rate stays below the maximum display's refresh rate. So with a 120 Hz display, I would cap the frame rate at 118 inside of Overwatch. Now with G-Sync still disabled and the frame rate of 118, I measured an average button to pixel delay of 22.67 milliseconds. When I then enable G-Sync inside the NVIDIA control panel, then this does not negatively affect the responsiveness of Overwatch, while it completely eliminates tearing. If I also enable FreeSync inside of Overwatch while still limiting the frame rate to 118, then the average delay is not really affected by that, as FreeSync is not active as long as my frame rate stays below the display's refresh rate. However, if I change the in-game FPS limiter to 300 while G-Sync and FreeSync are active, then FreeSync takes over, it limits my frame rate to 120, it eliminates tearing, and I get the full FreeSync delay as a result. This shows why it's so important to limit your frame rate to less than the display's refresh rate when you use G-Sync or FreeSync. If you want to learn more about AMD's FreeSync and NVIDIA's G-Sync, then you can find a link to my test video in the description down below. So, unless you can run games at frame rates much higher than the display's refresh rate, a 120 Hz display offers lower delays than a 60 Hz display. But besides these raw numbers, the gameplay experience is much more fluid and smoother at 120 Hz than at 60 Hz, as the display is able to show you twice the amount of frames per second. Another aspect of the display is the panel. While gaming monitors mostly use TN panels, many laptops come with an IPS panel. These have superior viewing angles and color accuracy, however they have more delay and worse motion clarity, also known as ghosting. But how bad is it? When I run the same button to pixel delay test on my PG248Q monitor, then it does indeed offer lower delays than the IPS panel used in this laptop. However, the difference at 120 Hz is just one frame or about 8 milliseconds, so that's not something that will hold you back. So how about motion clarity or ghosting? On top you see the UFO ghosting test from Blurbusters running on the laptop at 60 Hz and at 120 Hz. And below you see the same test running at 120 Hz on the PG248Q monitor. These tests were captured at 400 FPS with my camera and then slowed down inside of Adobe Premiere so that you can see the difference between the refresh rate and the displays. Now, while the motion is clearer on the PG248Q, you should not overrate this test, because just like with tearing, not everyone is equally sensitive to ghosting. I did not notice it while I played Overwatch, Battlefield 1, F1 2016 and Rocket League on the G701 at 118 FPS and with G-Sync enabled. So this is not a problem for me, but it's possible that other people who are more sensitive to this will disagree. So what's the bottom line then? As I said in the beginning of this video, a 60 Hz display makes no sense to me in a gaming laptop, and I hope that we will see a transition towards 120 Hz here like we have seen with gaming monitors, which moved on to 144 Hz and more in the past few years. The IPS panel in this specific laptop provides better viewing angles and color accuracy than TN panels in gaming monitors. However, it also has slightly more delay and worse motion clarity, but I dare to say that most gamers will not notice these as they are minor. If I would be looking for a gaming laptop right now, and if I could afford it, then I would definitely consider the G701 as it provided a great gaming experience during the time that I had it here for testing. I'd like to thank ASUS for providing me with the review sample of the G701, which is on its way back to ASUS now. Also, to avoid any misunderstanding, I want to make clear that I did not get paid by ASUS for making this video, neither am I sponsored by ASUS. So what you got here is my honest opinion, which is based on my test results and my hands-on experience with this laptop. If you like this kind of niche content where I take a look at different technologies and show you how these affect your experience, then you can help me to cover the costs of this channel by supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description below. Also, if you would like to stay up to date on what I'm currently working on, then you can follow me on Twitter or Facebook. The links are also in the description of this video. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris, and this was Battle Nonsense.